And welcome back, everyone, for going through what just happened with my internet. So we are going to be picking up again. And my understanding was Kate briefly went over the difference between an R script, an R notebook, and an R markdown. Kate, would you care to just refresh me on what those are?
I can only tell you the difference between an R script and an R markdown. So R script is just sort of the file which you can do things in, but it doesn't have, it's less organized, and the output is the output. So what you see is what you get. And to the person with trouble with R markdown, you could probably just open an R file right now. Again, if you could just stick around at the end of next session, as we can help you troubleshoot. We were trying to troubleshoot without you here, and we need to see what you're doing in order to help with that.
Try a notebook first. A notebook, give that a shot. Try to open a notebook. It's like the notebook is an intermediary between a script and a full markdown file, but it still does some of the same things. You can just do a lot more with a markdown file later on. So the difference, you said that the R script was just like a basic kind of text file, nothing else there, nothing fancy, and then the R markdown lets you organize things. Is that right? Okay, cool. And these three components are the pieces that you will be saving. And this is what will tell you what steps to take and will tell your computer what to do when handling the data. I usually, like I said before, I usually never use an R script file. It is just, it doesn't allow me to organize things as I would like to. And it is everything. So this, I have the script open. I just had written this to copy what Kate had in the chat before. Everything within an R script file, which is what I have as untitled one, is the everything is everything is considered code. Everything is I can't say that word, executable code, meaning that anything you type in here, it will, and then you try to run it, it will bring it on down into our console to run. And if you type anything and try to run it, it is going to, so it's going to try to run it, and it's like, I don't know what this is. You can comment things out, and I know that that is what individuals often do. And you would use the pound or hashtag, which is shift 3, to comment something out. And that is a way that you can give information to when you go back to it, of what is in that section. However, I think this is there are our markdown and our notebook allows you to do a little bit more with that. And I see in the chat that that it looks like you're trying to install HTML tools. Even though you install it, it doesn't work. One thing that you can do is try to restart R, and you may have already done this, but that's usually what I try to do. So under where is session, and I try to do this frequently. Again, this just shows that you have reproducible code if you are restarting R frequently, and you can still get the same results and reproduce the same results each and every time. Like I said, I don't use a note like a script file, so I'll close that. And like I said before, the real difference between a notebook and a markdown file is just a markdown file allows you to do a lot more, like Kate referred to, knitting, and later on all of your output is basically everything is in one spot, and it's really nice. So I usually will default to using markdown files no matter what, and that's what we'll be doing throughout the rest of this workshop, just because I think it is a useful skill and you can begin to refine things as you go. And that's exactly what we'll be doing. So This again was just, so I closed the notebook file. Now we have our Markdown file. And I know we put a title in here. You can see that the title is there. We have our author, which will most likely default to you. I hope it doesn't say my name. That would be weird if my name just populates in your computer. And then we have today's date and the output. This is called a YAML header. Don't even need to ever remember that until later on down the road when you want to work with Markdown files. So we have the title. Now we just want to just talk about what an R Markdown file does. You can see that there are these little chunks that I think Kate was talking about are code chunks. This is where the R code actually lives and runs. In between, you see that there is regular text. This is text that is not executable. This is text that lives there. And what is really nice is you can type in notes to yourself, or you can type in, say you're writing up a results section, you can run the results right up above it, and then you can type out those results right below it, and everything is just right there all in one spot. So you don't have to worry about a Word document and your SPSS output file, which output file are you using, which is the right one. So you're able to look at all of those pieces together, which is really, really useful for your future self collaborator. And we had talked about these other three panes, and we were briefly talking about what is this Markdown file. We have the code in each of these code chunks, and to run something, so to see the results or to execute a line of code, which is basically, I could type this same set of code that I have here on line 19. So if you, in your console, you can go to summary cars and you can run that. Cars is a data set that gives, it's like miles per gallon and things of different cars. It's like, I know, it's very descriptive. It is a data set that is already in R. It's in R, so you can just reference it, and that's what this is doing. So it's a nice way to just see it. And by executing the code in our Markdown file, you will see you can hover over there are a couple different ways to execute code. One of the ways is to run everything that is in this chunk here. And to do that, you would hit the play button. So if we hit the play button, it is going to run through every line within that chunk, and it's going to run it. And then it will show you the output. Again, it's putting everything right in this Markdown file, which is really nice. Sometimes I don't like to have my output right here. Just seeing it gets a little cluttered. You can either minimize it, you can close this, hit that X there, or you can edit the settings. But right now we'll keep it all in the default just to keep things straightforward. The other way to run, say you don't want to run the entire chunk, you just want to know what is this one line doing. So if we were to have this line, you can click it, have the cursor in there, and you can do it one of two ways, by going up to run and then run selected lines. You can click that, or usually what I like to use is this shortcut. We'll be trying to reference some shortcuts later on, but hitting Control Enter for PCs, I think it's Command Enter for Macs, that will also run that line of code. So here you don't have to highlight, you don't even have to highlight the whole line. You just put your cursor in there and I'm hitting Control Enter, and there it runs the code. Kate, can you confirm, is it Command?
Command Enter for Macs.
Okay. So you'll have that, and that is one way to just, I think that's really helpful to know what those keyboard shortcuts are. And again, I'm just outlining what are these different pieces to just what our studio is. And to navigate between the windows, you can see that there is a little minimize section in the top right of each of the windows, or a maximize. And you can see down in the console here, we can't see it right now. You can open that back up. And what you can also see is that depending on how many times you ran that chunk, it will have the output in the console. Because again, it is taking what you've written up above in this Markdown document, and it's popping it down in there to run it, to actually execute the code. So you can type a bunch of stuff up in this code chunk, but it isn't until you actually execute it that it's going to do something.
Justin, what are your thoughts on, like, I don't spend any time looking at the console once I have my R Markdown document open. Do you like think it's important to like have this open? Do you usually keep it minimized, the console section?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And what I usually like to do, like with my Markdown documents, you can see that it often puts the output right down in the document itself. I don't always like that. Just sometimes when there is a larger output, it will section it out, and then you have to go through and navigate that. I am used to looking at things in the console. And to do that, you can go up to the little gear icon and go down to where it says chunk output in line, meaning it is going to put it in the line in your document, or you can have it show in the console. And usually I will show it in the console. So when you check that, it's like, hey, I've showed you some stuff in the document. Do you want to clear it? And usually I'll clear it. So now you can see that line that we had before doesn't have the output down there. If we are to run it again, I'm scrolling down to the bottom of my console. I am highlighting or just putting my cursor in that line, hitting Control Enter. You can see that it does run that section, but it only shows it down in the console. That's just, again, these are like preferences that you'll find over time. And this is what I like to do, but it doesn't mean that that is the right way. There are some things that we'll try to highlight that are much preferred and would make your life a lot easier in the long run. This is one of just preference.
If you're new to R and RStudio, something that I found is that there's so much stuff on RStudio that you need to ignore some of it to start. So if there's something you're like, what's packages help viewer in the right-hand corner, like you probably don't need to know that until like you need to know it. Like it probably won't be a big thing. If we don't cover it today, it's probably something that you can ignore at least as you like start out in R.
Yeah, we want to give a general intro, and so we're going to be highlighting pieces that will be helpful to give a basic foundation, and then like Kate was saying, as you move forward, you'll be able to pay attention to other things. And I see that there was a question here in the chat and just asking about keyboard shortcuts. And this is something that I'll come back to as we move forward, but just as a kind of an update, you can go into Tools and you can go to Keyboard Shortcuts Help, and it brings up all of your keyboard shortcuts. So you have all of them there. These are all of mine. I have modified a couple of them, ones that I use more frequently, just to have them more easily on hand. And I'll highlight what that is once we get to it and how to do that if that's something that you want. But you can just go up here, like I said, to Tools, Keyboard Shortcuts Help, and that should give you all of your shortcuts that you have. If you want to modify any of the shortcuts, which we'll be doing later, you just go Tools, Modify Keyboard Shortcuts, and then it has all of your shortcuts here and how you can update them. Now we are back to the, I see a big reaction to keyboard shortcuts. I love them, and I want R to be as efficient as our brains are, and sometimes it goes a little bit kind of slower than we want it to. All right. Other questions about RStudio and just the makeup of it? Are we feeling comfortable with the different tabs, or are there things that you think would be good for me to look at before our next step is going to be loading in some data and how to set up a new project? Are there things that would be helpful right now? You can either unmute yourself and ask, or throw it in the chat for Kate and I. Or Kate, do you have any other questions or thoughts about just getting comfortable with R? Because it can feel overwhelming at times.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's always little stuff in the code that you're not sure what it's doing. And so one thing that you can do, which is the easiest thing ever, is to Google it. When in doubt, Google it out, which is like how I figured out that like the beginning of R code, or like / trial and error, which is the R pressure echo equals false. Like, what does that mean? Was me looking at the other options, doing, okay, if I write echo equals true, what does that do? If I don't include this part at all, what does that do? If I don't include the R part at all, then it just doesn't run. And that's part of just like figuring out what it's doing. I also would recommend never doing, this is hard this year, never doing R like when you only have like a few minutes, or you're really stressed, because it can be stressful in and of itself. But we're living in our current political climate, so that might not be possible. So as setting aside time to like troubleshoot and engage in some trial and error is my biggest tip for getting started.
Definitely 100%. And those things that you're highlighting, Kate, about what these are, will definitely go into some more detail, because I think, again, this is one of those things that will be helpful as we progress. But right now, just like knowing this is a code chunk and this will run code, that's good for right now. Once we start a project, then we can go into a little bit more detail. But again, one of the things, like what Kate was saying, is trial and error, and there is very little that you could do to actually like completely dismantle R and RStudio and ruin your data. It is very hard to ruin your data in R, because like I said, you're just loading it in. It's basically taking a copy, taking all the information of your data set, and then putting it into your environment. And then you can play around with it. And then if you want to save that as like an SPSS file or a CSV file or a TXT file, you're able to then export it. So you have to be very explicit about like, no, I made these changes and I want to export it to do those things. Whereas in SPSS or other programs, it is a lot easier to click something wrong and then it auto saves, or you save over it because you're like, I didn't do anything. And then you open it up again and you're like, oh no, that happened. And then we can talk about version control later on. But it looks like there are no questions. So it is just Kate and I rambling, which often happens. And that's why we have a podcast. What we are going to do now. What's that?
Where you can voluntarily listen or opt out.
That's true. Yeah, which many of you maybe are doing right now. You're like watching this again on YouTube and you're like, I'm skipping over this until Dustin actually opens up some data, which is what we're going to do right now. I know we had sent out some other, so what I'm going to do right now, because we weren't saving anything. I didn't save that document that we were just like running, because it's not going to be helpful for us moving forward. So I just exited out. I'm going to hit don't save. And what you can see is your console may look similar to this, where it has what you did. It's not going to save it, so that's totally fine. So it can look just like this. One thing that, before we jump into using the code and like loading in data, one thing I want to point out is it can be helpful to check for package updates. We'll talk a little bit about what packages are, what libraries are in just a second, but this is just a way to maybe not do it now, because I did it beforehand and I had like 15 packages that I needed to update and it took a while. So don't feel like you have to do this now. Just like every once in a while you can check for updates, and it will go through, it will look to see if any of the things that you've installed need to be updated. So that is one thing to make sure before you start a project, because maybe something changed in the code. Usually nothing major changes, but just in case, so you know you're using the most up-to-date version of the package. The other update that I like to check is just to make sure that your version of R is up to date. So this, I believe, is the most recent version of R. It is version 4.0.3. Bunny Wunnies freak out. It's fun. I'm sure you're all laughing at that. I can hear it. If you are not getting this, if this is not the R that you have installed, if you are using a Windows machine, unfortunately, this doesn't work on Macs. If you're using a Mac, you'll have to navigate back to R, and how we did that right at the beginning, where you go into R online and you download R, the CRAN, and you update R that way. One way to do it in Windows is to first you need to install a library, and you install a library by using install.packages, and it is called install R, so installer, and you can hit enter. And what this is doing is it is looking to remember when you first downloaded R, you said, this is my location, or this is one close to me. It's looking to that repository. It's looking up to see, is there a library that looks like this, that's called this? It's pulling it back down and it's installing it on your machine. So now we have this library that we installed, and we will take let's see, this is the way that I like to think about packages and libraries. I'll revisit this in just a minute, but just to go over and give some baseline, is to think of it as a different book. And so you have to go and pick up a book from a bookstore, and that is like using the install.packages. That's saying, I want to go get this book. And then once you get it, it's in your own personal library. It's in your home. You're able to grab it. To use that book, though, it's not just you have the knowledge of the book in your head. It's you have to go get it. You have to go pick it up, and then you want to read it. To do that in RStudio is using this library function. So it's basically saying, go look at my library, and I want to use this book for this script. So we installed installer. Now we want to use it. So you have to say library installer, and it will load that information in. And then to then run an update on it, you will just you will say update R, and then it will give you whether or not your R needs to be updated. So this is a really useful tool for, like I said, people using Windows machines. If you're not, then you have to go through just the traditional route of downloading a new version of R and installing that.
Luckily, it's not something you have to often do. You don't have to upload a new version of RStudio unless yours is like 5 years old, like mine was before I started this semester.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I bring that up right now, just in the beginning, is that if you find yourself having lots of difficulties, it may be the case that you're using an older version of R, and that would be one of my other ways to check that, just to see how old your version of R is and kind of go from there. So I know I went through that quickly. We'll have notes on this. This was more of just a quick check on those things. Okay. Now transitioning to actually loading in the data and getting data. I know we had some data sets that we had suggested that we might be using. So, we will be navigating to those right now, if I can remember which window I had those in. Let's see. So I am going to, nope, not doing that. I am going to be, I just have Firefox opening. and we are going to be using, just to first get familiar with loading in a data set, in the email we have a UFO data set that we'll be using. So I am just navigating to that website, and we will, Kaggle is a really nice, it has lots of open data sets that you're able to use, and so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to use that. So you can see that there is a complete version that has all these different cases. What we can do is you can just go up to download. Oh, I didn't realize that we had to, that's unfortunate. I did not think that we had to sign up for this. Let me see if, let me get a different one, because I don't want to force anyone to have to sign up for anything they don't want to. The see, I was already just signed in, so I had that all ready to go.
Maybe for next session we can put it on like a drive somewhere.
Yeah, that sounds good. So we have the, it looks like the college tuition data is one that is open through Tidy Tuesday, so we will use that one.
So again, that's in the email that was sent to you.
It's in the email. We can also put it here in the chat. That should be it. So Tidy Tuesday, if you're not familiar with it, is a really cool platform where each Tuesday a new data set is released, and then people try to visualize it. It's really cool. It's made, started by this gentleman, Thomas Mock. So we will, this is just a repository that has some of the data. And I think there is, let me see. So why don't we do this? Sorry, I had things set up to have the other data set ready to go, but not this one. So what we're going to do is, on that web page, you can see that there are different ways to get the data. And this is not usually how you load in data. So we will do this just to get the raw data, and then I'll show you how to first write a CSV, and then we can load in the data again. So right here, we will just, you can take this tuition cost line, I am copying, and in our console of RStudio, we will go ahead and paste that in. And then you can hit enter, and it will load in the data set. Let's see.
As a quick thing is, if you're someone who wants maybe to do, if you're working on a project with group data, this could be a way you get data in the future. Like if you have all of your stuff on GitHub. So this is another pull for GitHub in that everyone can have their data. And this, to me, I love reading in data this way because it's so much easier. So it's not so much harder the other way. I just like this particular method.
Yes, it is really easy, but oftentimes you don't have this repository to be able to work with.
Virtually never.
Yes. Usually you have some SPSS or CSV file that is in complete disarray. You will see that it loads in the columns here. It's just letting you know what information is in each of those. And you can see that name, state, those are characters, whereas the rest of them are, they double, but it like an integer. So these are numbers. And you can see something came up in our environment up here, which is the tuition cost. And you can see that if we are to click on it, so you can go ahead and click on that, there is all of the data. Okay, it looks like there might be some trouble with using the reader. So it looks like some individuals, thank you for copy and pasting in the error that you're receiving. So I am going to just paste the error in that so that everyone can see what that is. So we are getting an error. Some of you may be getting this error, and it's saying that there's no package called reader, and that is okay. That is how then we get. Can everybody hear the dogs barking now? Because they did not like that you can't read in data sets. They're upset. This is saying that we don't have a package called reader. And sometimes this will come up if you're using somebody else's code and they used some sort of data set, data file, and it just wasn't, you don't have the appropriate libraries. So all you have to do is here in the console, you can say install.packages again, open parenthesis, and then we need to use quotes. It can be single or double quotes, it doesn't matter. One of the things that is so awesome about using RStudio is that if you type an open parenthesis, it automatically gives you the closed. And same with quotes, it gives you both ends, which is really great. So this is saying we don't have the reader package, and you can run that, and sometimes it'll say like, hey, it depends on something else, so is it okay if we restart? You can say yes. And this happens too sometimes, that R crashes on you, and that's okay. You can just restart it, and usually because all of that information is there, you're able to get that back. So let's see if that, I'm just again copy pasting that line that we had. Now after you install .packages reader, you should be able to then use this line of code. And to view this data set, you can go up here and click on it, and it will show it up in your little viewer section where your script will be, where our markdown will be. Or you can see when we click on it, in our console, it gives us this view and then the name of that we gave the data. So it's by clicking on it, it's then telling the console, hey, view this data set. So you could even just type view and then whatever you called the data set, which in our case, because we copy pasted, then it is because then you can just view it that way as well.
We have a few more errors that we're just going to walk through, or errors that are popping up that just walk through, that we will walk through. Again, this is classic R. If it's not working for you, that's also not, it works for some people because of randomness and how their RStudio got set up and how old it is.
Mm-hmm. Usually my first always go to is to restart your R session. And again, that can go by session restart R. That is usually one way. It clears everything out. Again, if you have said to not save R data, that will usually clear things out. You can always just close it and reopen it as well. If you are still seeing stuff come up in your global environment, you can hit this little, there is a broom up here, and that will clear everything. And sometimes it is just a matter of getting things, like over time, as you use R more and more, these errors will likely decrease because you'll be setting up and having these established workflows to be able to do these things. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong in particular. If you're taking these same steps, it's okay. Just making sure that everything is being copied and pasted in, that you have this closed parenthesis and end of the so let's see, it looks like there is still an error message that we're getting, and this is perfect because we can walk through how this will be solved. So I see that someone was able to paste in the error message that we're getting, which is great. And what I am going to do now is we're going to Google it. So I am literally just copy pasting the error message that you're getting. And oftentimes other people are getting these error messages as well. When you use R quite often, there will be you will get familiar with Stack Overflow. So that's usually what will be one of the more common pieces that comes up. And the way that this is structured, if you're not familiar with it, is someone will post a question. They will usually have the title, which is the error message that you'll receive. And then they have some sort of initial description. They will likely place in their code and then any sort of questions. And usually, first, I double check to make sure that the error message that I'm receiving is either in the title or somewhere in here. It looks like this is a different kind of file. It looks like there is, so I'm going back. Let's see if someone, and then I usually just try to go down, because oftentimes similar errors can be found in different languages, in different computer languages. So that was a different language that we were just looking at. And this is, let's see, it looks like someone was having, now this is GitHub, it looks like somebody was having an issue with opening the connection for this individual. And it looks like they just changed things. So that's not helpful to us. It might be the case, it looks like because of the type of error that you're getting, there may be a firewall based on what this is saying. So it may be the case that there is a firewall or some other components, and it's because what we're trying to do is talk to GitHub, pull the data in, and it might be the case that that connection just isn't being made. And so it's trying over and over, but it times out after a certain amount of time so that your computer just doesn't keep chugging through something. What I'm going to do is get here. So because I forgot we can actually share data files in Zoom. So I'm going to do that. That will be a lot more straightforward, just given the fact that this file, the way that we are downloading data right now, can sometimes have additional connection errors. And so what I'm going to do, I'll go through this quickly just so that you know the process of getting a file and then exporting it to a CSV. So I'll talk through it. You don't have to follow along. You'll end up getting the raw CSV file. So I am running this code again. I am just taking a look at it, clicking here, trying to see, yep, this is the data set. This is what I want. And now what I am going to do is I want to write that to a CSV file. And the way to do that is actually just to write.csv. And you can see one of the other great things about RStudio is it suggests options for you. And throughout it, you can go through it and use those options. Those will be nice shortcuts to help you make your code more efficient, like your coding process. So now I want to write the CSV. I need to tell it what data I want written, and that is tuition underscore cost. I see an error in there. It is a capital V for view. And that might be the difficulty. For some reason, view needs to be capitalized. So I am writing to a CSV. I want to write this data that we're looking at right now, and I need to tell it where I want to save it. And what I am going to do is something that you don't have to worry. What we won't be doing, I am just a couple steps ahead. Let's see. I am just finding the file path of my my downloads. I don't usually ever do this. This is just for right now why I'm needing to do this. So I am telling it then where I want to save it, and that is going to be in this section. And that is the reason. I think it needs to be forward slashes. For some reason it's looking for an escape. Okay. This is not what I was ever expecting. Let's see. I'm just looking through. So now for some reason it's not letting me write a file. It might be the case that there isn't. Let's see. I think I need to actually name the file itself as well. So I'm going to do data.csv.
Yeah, Justin, that's a problem because I just ran write.csv without the file portion of your code, and it worked for me.
Okay. So now I am going to drop in the chat here a data file that's just titled data.csv. So everyone should have access to that now. That is the same data. And loading in data is one of the most difficult parts of R, unfortunately. And that is because it's the first thing that you need to do, and it's often the most difficult. So we are almost there, I promise. It's not usually this complicated, but I'm glad that it is, and that we're running into these issues, because this is what I want. So now everyone has the data. Everyone should have the data. If you don't have the data, please let me know, and we'll post this as well.
That's okay. That's okay if you don't. I also find R, it's really unfair that sometimes the hardest part is loading in the data because it starts you off on a bad foot. But
yes. And once you get this, you'll have it, and you'll know what needs to be tweaked moving forward. So now what we're going to be doing is starting a project. So now we want to start a project. The way that we're going to situate this is you have a new data set, you want to write a new paper. These are the steps that you should take in setting up a workflow, setting up your project. And the way to do that is we're going to be using these projects. And I know Kate touched on this briefly before. The projects is going to make future you very thankful for this. It situates everything within a single folder for you to work within. And oftentimes when you have a new project, you are working in just a single folder. You have all your data there, you're like reworking it. And so this just continues that and makes working with R a little bit easier. And you will never, I don't want you to ever have to use set working directory ever again. So we are going to go up here into the top right where it says projects. I'm going to do that again. So top right projects, we're going to go new project. And this is where maybe you've already created a folder on your desktop or wherever for this workshop. And if you have, you can say that you have an existing directory. And that's going to ask you then, where is it? But I want to start a new one. And you can do this as well. And then you can move everything that you already have and put it in here. So we're going to go to new directory, and we want a new project. And then we are going to name the project. And so this is usually like, it can be the rough name of your paper that you want. It can be just like whatever you're working on. I'm going to name it You Can Grad School Workshop. I'm going to do, yeah. And then after you name it, you can tell it where you want it to live. And I have a central, later on we can talk about GitHub, but I usually have just a central spot where all my projects live in separate folders, of course. And so that's where it's defaulting to. And you don't need to have these boxes checked. If you want it to open in a new session, that just means that it's going to create a new R session, a new R window, and then that will be your project. But you don't have to do that, and we won't do that right now. Now you can go to Create Project, and you will see that this is just basically the same thing as we just opened R. This is where it is. And you can see that here, if we go to where I saved that, let me just get to it before I share it with you all. So this was...
Let us know. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Just let us know as you're doing this if you're running into any issues.
So you will see that this was the folder that I put everything in. You can see that these are my other projects that I have. And then here is the new directory that we created. And so this folder, everything in here will be associated with this workshop. You will have this project, and right now nothing's in there. It's just the project. When it comes to other pieces, it might have saved it. If you had notes in the console, you won't be able to save anything in the console. If you had notes in a script or somewhere else, then that should have saved wherever you left that.
If you saved it, you can just move it into the R project as well.
Yeah.
I did that. I was saving things on my R Markdown, and then I realized I was like, oh no, when I made the project, I didn't put the R Markdown in it. So I just went to File Explorer on Mac or whatever the file equivalent File Explorer is, and then moved it into this project.
And by moving it into the project is just that folder that you're talking about. So yeah. There is this like R project folder. You'll see that it has a nice little R cube. And then I know we said that we didn't talk about it just yet, but in your files section, now you'll see that it's looking into where your project lives. It's looking at that folder. And so if you add in any documents, they're going to come up here in the bottom right in our files section. So oftentimes workshops that I've seen in the past and how other people have talked about using R and getting ready with R is to use something called the working directory. And because RStudio is just a program, it can look anywhere in your computer, and it can look anywhere for data, which isn't the case usually with other programs when the file itself is the data and you open it in SPSS and you're able to do and manipulate things. R can look anywhere, and that is both wonderful and overwhelming at the same time, and I think that set working directory can get confusing. So the working directory is where RStudio and R are looking for your data. And by creating a project, we're saying, hey, everything is going to live right here. You don't have to worry about anything else. Everything is just going to be in this folder, so don't sweat about it. And that's what we want. We don't want to make this too complex for everyone. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a Markdown file. So going up to File or hitting that little plus button, New File, and we're going to use a Markdown. And we'll just use that same name that we had before because we didn't save it. And you can see that in our console, maybe your other notes come up, or in the script section. So we have this file up here, and I think Kate had talked about this before, we're just going to get rid of all of this stuff because this is all just example text that we're not going to be needing. So we'll get rid of that, and then you'll see that our Markdown document needs to be saved. So we created it, we gave it a title, but we didn't save anything. Now when you hit save, so using our nice little floppy disk here, it should situate you in the directory that you created in our project. And now here we are sitting in the project, and we have our workshop project, and we can say r I'm going to name it r_workshop script, or let's say Markdown, because it's a Markdown file and I don't want to confuse myself. So now that when we save that, I'm just going to hit save. You can see that in the bottom right in our files section, our Markdown document is now there. And if we look I'm just looking in the folder section, there's the file. So now again, everything is living in the one section that we want. We can do that one more time. So before we'll be taking a break here in just the next couple minutes. So what you want to do is, Kate, you got a question?
Yeah. No, sorry, I unmuted myself.
It's okay. So we need to create a new Markdown file. We will go up here to you can do the plus, or you can go file. But here I just clicked the plus this time in the top left. And then you go down to our Markdown. You select that. And then here it's just asking you to name it. So this is putting a name. You can change this later on. This isn't super important. I will just call it our workshop. Since I already have one, I'll just put this as the number 2. And so this will create then another document. And then because this is all sample text and sample script, we don't need any of it. So after line 6, you want to keep the heading stuff. So 1 through 6 will stay there. 7 on, you can delete. So I'm putting my cursor at line 7, scrolling down, and then holding shift, which is how you can select multiple lines. Hold shift and then click at the end there, and then I'm just hitting backspace. So now all you should have is line 1 through 6 with whatever title you had, your author, date, and then the type of output. Then we will save that. You can either go hit the floppy disk or go file save. I usually like to do that. Hit the floppy disk, and then here is where you're actually naming the file itself. So I am going to just name it similar. So our workshop _markdown 2. Again, you don't need to do this. We'll only be using one Markdown. This is just, again, to show the process. And then I hit enter to save. And so now we have different tabs for the Markdown documents that we created. And over in the right-hand side, your Markdown document should have populated there as well. So now we have our Markdown document. I'm going to close the second one so that I only have one open. And we want to always start with our code chunk. So this will be the last bit before we hop off for a break. And to do that, you can do insert, and then you can insert an R chunk. If you are fluent in other languages, you can also use RStudio for those things. I am not, and I don't know. But so you do insert R. The other thing, which is one of the keyboard shortcuts that I have set up, is if I hover over insert, you can see that my shortcut is Control-Alt-I. So if I'm just here on line 12, I'm hitting Control-Alt-I. It creates a new code chunk. You can go to Tools, and nope, it was Help. Nope, what was it? Yes, Tools. I got it. Modify keyboard shortcuts, and then you can go into Filter and just search for chunk or insert chunk. I can't remember what the default is, but the Control-Alt-I was just easier for me to do. I don't know why. But then you can update that, and then that makes it a lot easier to you can just make as many chunks as you want. I don't know why you would need to do that, but you can. So we'll start. We've inserted a chunk, and that is where we can take a little bit of a break. Just how long do you think, Kate? Just like 10 minutes?
Do we want to do 15 minutes and then 10 minutes for the people if you have a question? And just a quick note, so the person who is checking in about whether the videos will be available, we'll send everyone an email with the videos when we have them up. It'll probably be on YouTube, I think. So just correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So great. So we'll meet at 1:30. If you have a question or a problem, let's say 1:25.
Yeah, or I'll be.
Oh, sorry, 12:25 Central Time. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We just So we'll have that. I'll stick around throughout that time. I might shut off my video and like go grab some water and come back, but feel free to send a chat. I'm gonna stop the recording right now,